You're listening to the After the Show movie podcast brought to you by ascully.com. And here are your hosts, A Scully and Sid Talk. Good morning, good afternoon, Sid Talk.
Is it morning? Is it afternoon? I think you missed the one thing. It's somewhere. It's morning and afternoon, yes. Good evening.
It's the evening. What do you have to say to the listeners? Would you want to tell them about...
It was like the whole podcast is going to be, you've asked me this question and then we're done?
Before the after the show discussion, you want to tell them about your adventures?
My adventure? Oh, I was like, what are you talking about? I mean, you know, it was colonoscopy and the endoscopy. People hear those words, they're like, well, getting ready, drinking that gallon of Gavolite was really the biggest challenge. Do that, shit your guts out, show up at the hospital, chit-chatting with them, they put you on a table, you know, they're talking to you, and then for me, I just woke up and I was back where I started, and it was done. It was like it never even happened.
For people who don't know what the word is, putting a camera in your asshole.
Well, they put a thing, they check your colon to see if you have any. I'm 51 years old, so you know you want to start checking. It's one of those kinds of cancers and whatnot that you can't tell that you have for a long time. So I figure I'll go with the well woman visit suggestions and have it done. The endoscopy was because I have like weird heartburn and stuff, so they just checked that in as well. But I'm good. I have the acid reflux, as they like to call it.
You have a tip-top asshole.
It's not about your butthole. Why do you keep focusing on that? It's about your colon. Funny. It's not actually funny, because I think that makes people think it's kind of a joke procedure, when in fact it can save your life. So if you keep joking about assholes and think about all the people who have died from colon cancer because they were either too stubborn or just thought, ew, I don't want anybody poking around my asshole.
I think if you don't make a joke about it, people won't...
I think if you do make a joke of it, then people won't take it seriously, and you can die because you don't do it.
Can you die for doing it?
You're going to die no matter what. I mean, eventually. I'm just saying, why not just check it out? It's like a mammogram. Like, people are like, oh, I don't want a stranger touching my boobs. Right, so you'd rather die from breast cancer as a possibility, not a direct causation there, but a possibility of finding it, checking it, figuring it out, doing something about it, and living longer than you would have if you weren't all weird and make jokes and be all fussy about it. It's just a bodily function.
If you put one down the throat and one in their asshole, could they see each other?
No. What is wrong with you? I don't find it particularly funny, except that I want people to lighten up about it. You said that you put them both in one in both. They didn't go at the same time.
Oh.
I don't know why you think... So you're one of those people who thinks it's just a joke. Because then maybe you won't ever have one, and then we'll have a problem.
I'm not one of those people who thinks it's a joke. But you can joke about something like
definitely
this.
Can joke about the process cancer, of it. But not to make it be like so funny that people don't take it seriously. And it isn't just somebody sticking something up your ass. They're just exploring your colon. There's not another way to do it. We don't have tricorders yet, like our lovely Star Trek doctors did or do in the future, fictionally.
Oh yeah, you think they would have invented something where they just scan you?
Well, you can get a scan, like an MRI or whatever, but they may not find the softest tissue, and that is the stuff that the camera can see, but that X-rays and whatnot don't see yet until it's actually metastasized.
Here's my question, and it's not a joke. I'm not trying to be funny.
Are you going to use the word asshole again?
My question is, can you look at the pictures it took?
They will show it to you if you have a problem.
Can you log on to the internet and see it all?
I got an email saying that I had some new reports on my portal from a medical thing, but I haven't looked at it.
Because it would make great art. You could...
I'm sure somebody's done that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if anyone's tuned in for medical lessons... It's just a fact of life. Come on. If everybody's going to be all somber and sad, rightfully so, when someone gets sick and finds out they have cancer, and then it's like, oh, you know, we have limited options now, and everyone's really fucking bummed out. And if you look back 5 years earlier when they had an option, a possibility of maybe finding it, I don't think that's funny, and I do think it's important. So there's my lecture.
All right, so it is Saturday, January the 19th. This is After the Show number 566.
Yeah, it's about movies, not about
We are a weekly movie review show, and this week we're going to review a movie, and that movie will be First Man. It's a 2018 movie, releases on Blu-ray and 4K on January the 22nd, so that's this week. It's rated PG-13, and it's from our friends at Universal, who sent us a copy for review. And Sid Talk will give you the synopsis of First Man.
Really? Of all the all the movies to ask me to give you a synopsis of. Let me just see if I can sum it up. It's the first man who stepped on the moon.
And that is?
That's Neil Armstrong. I mean, it's just sort of a Hollywood version of a biopic of this person from the time he was testing until he stepped on the moon.
It is.
That's pretty much it. I don't think you need a synopsis for this one.
So this is from director Damien Chazelle, who I'm a fan of. He did Whiplash and La La Land, which La La Land almost won the Oscar, but then didn't.
So close.
Yeah, so First Man is in the running also. They haven't had the announcement yet, but it's been up for awards already. So this guy is on a roll. So I will say, start off, remember last week? We watched the movie Mid-90s by director Jonah Hill. Mm-hmm. And I loved it.
You did.
And I was like, wow, I've loved a movie. That's great to have a movie that you love for the first movie of 2019.
Correct. Is that a question?
The second movie review of 2019, First Man. I loved it. Loved it.
One of the most recent years, we started out with a bunch of bummer movies, like not good movies. I forget which year it was.
Yeah, I do remember something of that kind, because there's often some shitty movies in January. They kind of release some crappy movies before they get on with the good stuff.
Don't know about that.
We saw some kind of horror film on a January, I remember, and it was really terrible. But First Man, I loved it. Loved it. I would give it a 10 out of 10 if I had to give it a number.
Nice.
Damien Chazelle is becoming one of my favorite directors. This multiplied my love for him. I multiplied my love for my boyfriend, Ryan Gosling.
You do have a man crush. I'll give you that.
I totally do. If I had an actor that I just like everything about his style, and some might say he's just the same guy in everything, but I disagree.
I mean, he has that broody, sort of like pensive, emotional boy thing, and he does it again this time. So yes, you could still say
apart from him not being a boy, he's actually a man.
Oh, yeah, man, boy, whatever.
First man. He's the first man.
He's the first boy. I like what she said to him. The wife said to the men, you're just a bunch of boys building models out of balsam wood. Whatever she said. Balsa wood.
Yeah.
And she's right. I mean, they accomplished a lot.
You know what balsa wood is, right?
No.
It's the wood that you make those toy airplanes out of, because the wood's very light.
Makes sense now.
Yeah. So, First Man is the story of Neil Armstrong. You might have heard of him. He was the first man to put his feet on the moon back in 1969. And this is...
And what day was that in 1969?
I think it was the 17th of July. Or was it the 16th of July?
And how old were you?
I was about 5 days old. And I was watching from my couch, probably.
And I was a year and a half old.
Yes. So, I've always been fascinated with space since I was a child. I actually had a Neil Armstrong fancy dress astronaut suit.
That would be Halloween costume to the rest of us.
Yeah. That I used to just wear all the time. If my grandma was still alive and you would ask her, she would say he would never take it off. And I used to leave the helmet on, and it wasn't one of those like plastic helmets. It was kind of made out of cloth with a plastic front. Looked like a beekeeper's helmet. But I can remember always wearing it, and it said Neil Armstrong on the front. And I just loved space stuff. Hence why I love Star Wars, I guess.
True.
So, I always, as a kid, I was like, I want to be a spaceman. Like a lot of little kids do. So I've always had a fascination with space, and this, you could say it's a biopic. Is it or isn't it? I mean, it's a drama. It's based on the true, but then there's some embellishments, I guess.
Yeah.
Don't take it for like 100% accuracy.
It's not a biography as in like a documentary.
Yeah, and it doesn't go too far off script or anything. There are some things in here, if you go and look up the facts about Neil Armstrong, that might be off a little bit. But the endorsement of his actual children and his wife said that it was the most realistic depiction of him. So you could go with that too. So this movie depicts him, would you agree, as kind of detached a little bit from everything else that's not space stuff?
Yeah.
And not, I just read, I like to always go and read what other people think of movies after I've watched a movie. And I usually know it's just going to be a load of idiots who don't understand things.
You got that right.
And the main thing I got from what people who didn't like this movie said was he isn't very personable, Neil Armstrong, in this movie. He's just a dull kind of, just a one-note thing. Which, if his children agree that that's what he was like, why would you not portray him that way? I mean, you don't want to portray him as like Mr. Jazz Hands and he's always excited all the time, if that's not what he was. So
it's like trying to rewrite history, which is really annoying.
Yeah. So you get a realistic portrayal of a man who is, like you said, this isn't like about Neil Armstrong and like everything's perfect. It shows flaws and it shows family life might not be as great as your rose-tinted glasses imagine. And while it does have a lot of action and it shows a lot of different space scenes, which are all fantastic, it deals a lot in Neil Armstrong's personal life. His wife, the fact that he had a baby, a child who died, which I had no idea about. She had a brain tumor and died, and how old was she? Looks
like she was about 3.
Yeah, which is very sad, and it kind of the movie starts off that way, really, with that. And, he's with his wife and his children, and in between all that, it shows you him going through the training process and through test flights before the actual Apollo 11 mission. And they are all in great detail, I found, and all very thrilling to watch and listen to, because the actual space, I would say the opening sequence of this movie, which is him doing that test flight in the jet that goes up into the atmosphere and then comes back down, it is thrilling to look at.
Yeah.
I mean, it's an amazing opening to the movie. And even though you know history and you know that he doesn't die on any of these missions.
It's like I keep having to say to myself, no, the whole thing is going to turn out to be a success.
Didn't you feel danger along the way?
Oh, absolutely.
So, and it kind of put it into my mind of how dangerous space travel actually is. You think of it all romanticized, they get in a spaceship and they go to space and they walk on the moon. But when you actually see the nuts and bolts of it, which you kind of do in this movie, and
literally,
how this small space they crammed into, how I think one thing it did succeed on, and it's the sound design of this movie, is every little creak of metal, and it sounds like it's going to fall apart when they launch. When you're sat in that little capsule with them and it's launching, the noises that it's making sound like it's just all going to fall apart and they're just going to get jettisoned out of it.
Definitely.
And if that's what it sounded like in real life, I would imagine that would be terrifying, because you could be dead any second, right? Or you just don't think about it that way. So I think it was really next level space sequences. They were so well done. They were flawless. It looked like they were for real. Like when you see this NASA footage from space, that's what all this looked like. What did you think of the space stuff?
Oh, I was in it. I was mesmerized. I too have a thing about space and space travel and the universe, and not questions like where does it all end and what's all out there, but it's just insanely amazing that we exist in it. I love it, and so I don't know what it's like to be out in space, but I didn't feel like just I was sitting in my chair and watching some green screen thing happen. I was like, oh, I can imagine. I've driven. Okay, that's how I associate it. I've ridden in trucks, big old trucks like from the 60s that were rattly and like feel like they're gonna shake your bones, like no springs in the seats or anything, and you have to like there's no seat belts, and you like have to hold on to the dashboard because it's so bumpy and so like rattly. And I went flashback to that and thought of that as that technology, obviously more advanced, but it was the 50s and 60s when they were building these things. And so I really felt it. I thought that cut into me, like the sounds, like you said, the of the little metal on metal, and where you feel like you could, if you looked around, you could see nuts and bolts just popping out of their holes.
Yeah, because inside the capsule itself, it's not very fancy, is it? That you can see the nuts and bolts and the bits of, interestingly enough, and you actually mentioned it. We have a virtual reality experience. It's not a game. It's called like Apollo 11 VR, I believe. And you actually, one of them, very little. You've not done much VR, but you did that one.
I loved it.
And you sit in that for an hour, and
NASA did it, so it's that experience.
Yeah, and you basically experience what it's like being in that capsule. And I have also done that, and I'm telling you, when Damien Chazelle in the extras said, when I was filming the in-capsule scenes on this movie, I wanted it to be kind of like VR, like you're in there with them, and you understand like the scope and the size. He totally nailed that, because it brought me back to that VR experience where you sat looking out of that little window.
Definitely.
And it's got the little markings on it so you can see the trajectory. And there's the tiny little dials all in front of you. So I really think he nailed being... Even, the Tom Hanks movie, Apollo 13. I think this captured a more realistic view. That one was a bit more glossy. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That one was a bit more Hollywoody. This one's a bit more... No, you're just in this thing with the dudes. Now, spoiler, they land on the moon. And
Neil Armstrong is, in fact, the first man on the moon.
And he actually steps on the moon.
Well, that is, unless you're a moon landing denier.
Yeah, true.
In which case you're rolling your eyes and thinking we're all full of shit. And if they can make it look real in this movie, then obviously that's fake too.
Yeah.
That's fine. You can think whatever you want. I wasn't there, so I don't actually know if it is true.
I have to say,
I'll be honest.
It's pretty awe-inspiring when the actual scene where he steps off and then you see the moon and you see the curvature and the reflection of it in his visor and everything. It all looked amazing. It was. They use IMAX. They changed the aspect ratio to the full screen during that sequence where they land on the moon. Only in that sequence, actually. And it even adds to it. It makes it look, whoa. Like, it looks... They use some... in the extras that we saw, the reason it looks so good is Can you explain it? Like it's a rig, would you say? Well, I would say it's like a theme park ride.
Kind of, yeah. Like there's a big giant curved screen. Giant as in like 30 feet high and 70 feet long that's slightly curved around the set. It's like the whole wall. It's like, it would have been a green... We've all seen the green big walls that they've built for green screen movies. This is just a big actual screen monitor, like a movie screen.
LED,
and they're showing the footage on the screen while they're filming the other scene, which is not new technology as in the earliest of movies did this. They projected images onto the wall or onto a screen behind the actors or the action and then filmed the action with like the train going down the tracks or whatever, like live. They didn't have green screen, so they would do the film in front of a film. So that's not new. But the fact that it looked so, like I had no clue at all. And so they said while they're doing it, because they're in that little capsule thing, kind of a fake capsule, and they look out the window, that's what they're really seeing. They don't even have to pretend, which I guess would lower their acting status a bit. They can look out the window and it's like they are looking at the earth in the horizon, because the whole screen that wraps around them is showing that. So I think that was pretty cool. I'd like to see that in other movies.
And what's interesting as well is because they're in this fake capsule in front of the screen and what they see out the window is the real, what they're going to be seeing in the film. They even used the lighting off the film as the lighting for inside the capsule. So if the moon is lighting the window up, then that's what they're going to... So it's all like it's like they're on a little theme park ride, because the capsule isn't static. It actually is synced to the visuals. So if the capsule is rotating, then it actually is rotating with them in it. And the footage is staying where it should be. So I've never seen anything like that. He said it was the first time it's been done, right? Probably. And it really made it seem real to me. Like, I couldn't... There were times where I was watching the space parts going, how the hell did they make it so... I still don't understand how they do zero-G and make it look convincing. In this movie, where he throws the tape at him, he says, is there any music in here? And he throws a cassette tape over. How do they do that? Is that just a CG tape?
I don't know.
I've always wondered how they do that, but it all looks incredible. So what did you think about the drama between Neil and his wife? Because that's a lot of the movie too.
That's a movie of two things, really. And the fact of a person driven, he was obviously motivated and had whatever the word is, like he wanted to be in these missions. We didn't see a lot of the politics involved. We saw that in the beginning they thought he needed to be slowed down because he made some mistake in judgment on the first flight that we see or whatever. So then they tell him, just write the report, and he's kind of like, you grounded me? And then you feel this surge in him to learn more, do more, and be the guy who they then pick eventually for the moon mission. Like, it's not addressed at all. It's just, you just feel like he's really, really wants to keep moving forward in the space mission. And you see in his eyes when you first see him get out of the atmosphere in that F-15, so it's called?
Yeah.
And he's just, the way it's portrayed, he's just amazed at the whole of it. Like looking at the earth, looking at the sky, thinking of the possibilities. It's all wrapped up in just his eye movement. I mean, I'm just making that up probably, but...
No, you can totally...
But then later when they ask him about it, he's like, I don't really see it as anything other than an opportunity for us to see the world or see life from a different perspective. And so I feel like that aspect of his personality leads him to the moon, but it could have been anything. He could have been a guy who wanted to be a race car driver. He could have been wanted to be the best brain surgeon in the world. He could have been the guy who wanted to circumnavigate the world 1,000 years ago. You know what I mean? That personality trait is what I kind of latched onto. And the cost of that personality trait, which still exists in humans, is that your interpersonal relationships, there's where it is. Like, what am I if I'm married and I have kids, I have to be there too. But the thing I want is so big and so difficult and requires so much of my time and energy. So I thought that was really the heart of the whole movie to me, and how they balanced it out was the key, was the whole thing. So going back and forth from, like, when he's actually doing the test on, what was it called? Gemini 8 that they called it. She's first listening and trying to make sure everything's okay. And then she's basically just ends up just dealing with the kids. The kids are fighting and she's there. And so you're seeing his home life is just life. And
regular. Should
that be more important than you just floating around in space? Because it seems really pointless, to some people.
Yeah.
Or is this drive that a human has to accomplish the thing that's in their scope, and that's it. That's all that person wants to accomplish. That makes it important, but then your people are important too. And so I feel like it was really well balanced. And I like the wife. I don't know if she's a real true depiction of the woman, but she loved him in a way that wasn't romantic and all mushy-gushy. There's a little bit of sexiness, you could tell, from when they were younger. They kind of flirt around with each other. But she loves him. She accepts it, but she will not let him use this big thing that he's doing as some bullshit excuse to not be there for his family.
When she tells him, you are going to speak to the children.
You will. You best figure out what you're going to say.
Yeah, so you're going to...
But she didn't expect him to be all flowery or anything. She let him say what he needed to say. She didn't, even what he said, you're like, that's not enough. As a person, you're like, that's not enough. You should be like... different, but she accepted the way he was, but that was non-negotiable. But he was going to talk to them.
He's pretty unemotional generally. I like the scene where he came back from the. You remember where he came back to his backyard just to be in the backyard on his own?
Yeah,
and his friend came.
You think I would have come here if I wanted to talk to anybody?
Yeah, he said, do you think I would have left and come home and stood here on my own if I wanted to talk to anybody? And I can understand. And the guy was like, I'm here for you, dude. Like,
yeah, but I get it. Also, a person who accepted it,
So there was a lot of scenes like that where you were like, yeah, he's, he is emotional inside. It just doesn't show so much.
But it just doesn't, like, we've designed how we think we're supposed to express ourselves, haven't we? Through poetry and music and movies and stories and tales of romance, when in fact, we haven't really cornered the market on figuring out how we humans are supposed to, you can't dictate what love is or how it is for us to express it. We just think we have, because it looks better to have a sexy, dynamic, romantic, flirty guy who's like winking at his wife all the time and does everything right, lovey-dovey, great with the kids. But that's not real. I mean, it can be, but it's not 100% real. And so that's why I loved about the way they showed them both.
I also love we saw it a couple of times, the scene where before his little girl dies and she's just asleep and he's touching her hair. I mean, there's an emotional father. Like, he's actually being
it's all
emotional.
Inside.
Yeah, because he knows she's going to die. Because, they've already had the
I like that they showed him wanting to actually call the guy who invented the radiation machine and to see what else could be done. Like, he's like, well,
his scientific brain.
Yeah, it's like, I could just talk to that guy because it's not working. So what can we make? And I wonder, I don't know, this was not addressed at all, but the idea that a person of science, which he is, an engineer, problem solver, that there's his little daughter with something wrong with her and he has like zero control, even though probably in his mind it's like, I could solve this problem. I don't have the right to, it's impossible that I can't solve this. And that would be a frustration for a person who can't express it. So he dumps all that energy into solving all the problems to get to the moon. Again, I'm making that up probably, but him trying to call the radiology engineer kind of told me, like, if he had his way, he might have stopped going to the moon and decided to build a new radiology machine, right? If that was the possibility. But so I really like that as an added little thing in there.
Yeah, and the people who I saw reviews saying, it's just mostly about Neil Armstrong's personal life. That's not true either. There's lots of space stuff in this movie.
Oh, yeah. Lots.
Yeah, I mean, it's chocker with... In fact, I was like, wow, I
just want to know what's wrong with people.
Yeah, at first I was like, and we see the opening sequence, and then we see, like, him being trained on that weird thing that spins him around.
Yeah.
And then we see, like, an actual test mission. I was like, wow, we're going to see all these things? I was just expecting we'd see the actual flight to the moon. I didn't know we were going to see all that stuff. So you see quite a lot of different things.
I felt like it was really well balanced between, and if you focus on where it's a guy going to the moon and NASA and the space race and two nations trying to get to the moon first and all that. That's part of the story, but it's really about humanity and what we are, how we live our lives. Like, this could be a story about a guy who wanted to open the first convenience store on the corner in a neighborhood where seems impossible, right? I mean, I'm not diminishing the fact of going to the moon. I'm saying that person, our desires to accomplish a thing, it's all the same, just on different scales and different impacts to different amounts of people. That's what I think they just really could. If you unplug the NASA part of this and plugged in something else, it would have been just as moving, I think.
I really, also, another thing I have to mention is that Damien Chazelle obviously likes music. Old-timey music he likes a lot. La La Land is especially kind of a thing to that. But the soundtrack to this movie, which featured like songs from the era and like really awesome classical music. During the landing on the moon, it made me feel like I wanted to cry. It was to do with the music.
Oh, definitely.
When the capsule was coming into land, that whole sequence, which lasts about 15 minutes, and it's just like a lot of it's just looking out of this little window and seeing the moon come up closer and closer. But there's like this swelling orchestral thing going on. And it's just awesome. Like, there's a lot of really cool music in here. So I wanted to point that out. Also, the very final scene, which I won't spoil, this is, the very final shot we see, that felt really emotional to me too.
Mm-hmm.
Even though it was kind of cold in a way, and also you didn't know how they're going to react to each other exactly. I really liked it.
I agree. I liked it.
I would give this movie an Oscar. If I was in charge of the Oscars, this movie would get it. Hopefully it will. So let's go on to the cast. Ryan Gosling plays Neil Armstrong. You know what I'm going to say? I love Ryan Gosling, one of my favorite actors, easily. I mean, look at him in La La Land, right? Singing and dancing and playing that guy. And look at him in this. It's different. People say he's the same. It's not. Not the same.
Definitively not the same.
I think he played this really well. Yes, this is stoic the entire time. There is a moment where he laughs a little bit and smiles, but he's mostly focused and on the game. You know when they look at each other when it takes off and then they actually safely get into space and they both look at each other, Buzz and him.
Yeah.
Those moments, like it was like, well, there's the joy in this guy's life. These moments. Exactly. And you see it from that. So what do you think of Ryan Gosling? I don't know if you're as big a fan as I am.
I'm not quite as big as you, but I totally appreciate... I do see a little sameness, even though it's with the different... Because think all the way back to, Lars and the Real Girl. They're just this pensive, quiet, head down, eyes down, sometimes a lot of looking about the tops of his eyes. Lots of focused moments, of him contemplating and expressions, which he's really good at, because I got a lot from his expressions.
Yeah, totally.
And the singing and dancing was one thing, but that character in La La Land was also kind of a, thoughtful, brooding musician guy, so I like him. And the variety comes from the character he's being, not so much from him. So I guess that's a good thing.
Yeah, I think he played it just right. I really do. I felt that character, a kind of focused, slightly cold character came through. Claire Foy plays his wife, Janet Armstrong. Also very good, especially in the scenes where she had to kind of confront him, really. Because he's not going to deal with certain situations. And
exactly.
She makes him, literally makes him. And he doesn't shout back at her or storm off in a huff.
Slams a couple doors, has that sort of quiet, old school thing going on. But
she's very powerful, I think. And that end scene I just talked about, looking at each other.
Yeah, definitely.
There's a lot going on in that scene, even though there's no talking. And a lot of it comes from her. Corey Stoll plays Buzz Aldrin. You'll know Buzz Aldrin. Not Buzz Lightyear, Buzz Aldrin. And you'll know Corey Stoll as well. You'll have seen him in many things. But you'll be like, no, what have I seen him in? What do you think of him?
He was good. I was convinced that he was, he's sort of the not irreverent, but...
nobody's like a silly...
He was unemotional as in... He would say it like it was, Some astronauts die in the process of this whole thing happening, and his thing was, well, he's dead, so I want to be the guy who goes to the moon, right? Everybody's thinking it. So it's like he's the...
outspoken.
And at the press conference, he kind of wants to take over and be a little bit... He's not like Mr. Dynamo or anything, but just a little bit more of that, what we would like to think of an astronaut, I guess, being, dynamic and interesting.
And then...
mouthy.
What a lot of people don't ever cotton on to is there was a third guy up there on this Apollo 11.
He was the guy from Witness.
He was called Mike Collins. And, everybody goes, oh yeah, Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin. But you never hear Mike Collins. He was like the Beatle that nobody knows the name of. And he's played by Lucas Haas, what do you know him from?
He was the kid from Witness.
Right. Let's see, I don't remember a kid in Witness.
He was the Witness.
I don't remember Witness, I guess.
I love Kelly McGillis.
It, but I don't remember seeing it.
You don't remember Han Solo?
I do. I know he was in it. I just don't remember seeing it.
He was in a like a bathroom, and some bad guys did a thing, and then he was the witness,
Right.
and then Harrison Ford had to go, and
So how did you like him as a man
he was good.
and not a witness? Well, he was a witness to the land. He witnessed them both walk on the moon and didn't do it himself.
No, he was good. I mean, just to put this out there, I don't think anyone failed in this movie for performances. So
Yeah. I also put down Jason Clarke, who I really like. He's also an actor that you'll just see a lot, but not. And he plays Ed White. And Kyle Chandler is another one who you see in a lot of things, but I don't think he gets his dues. Like, he plays Decky.
yeah,
There are a lot of actors you know in this movie who you're like, oh yeah, it's that guy, but you might not know his name. So this is directed by Damien Chazelle. I said earlier, like Paul Thomas Anderson's my favorite director. Damien Chazelle is actually, he's not going to probably ever top Paul Thomas Anderson.
I was going to say, my God, is this a momentous occasion?
But he's really, really, like, in my top 5 list. Like,
Wow.
He really is. Like, and Whiplash really impressed me when I saw it. And then La La Land, I just fell in love with that. And I don't like musicals, so I see that as if you can make me like a musical, there's something going on with your directing. And then I didn't know what to expect from this, because it's totally different to those two movies. And this just blew me away completely. So this guy. How old is he? Like, how old is Damien Chazelle? He seems like a kid to me when I watch him.
You know what I just about did?
What?
A word. How old is Damien Chazelle?
I'll use the manual IMDb. He was
A word is our code word for Alexa.
He was born in 1985.
I'm surrounded
Do the
by
math.
echoes, so you never know when they're going to be listening. How old was he?
1985 he was born.
Don't make me do math.
Do the math.
Don't make me do math. You do the math.
All right, I'll show you how I work this out. So it'll be like 1985, then I'll go 95,
34.
then I'll go 2005, then I'll go 2015. That would be 30.
I graduated in 86,
and
this
then I
is
would
my
add the
34th
4
year.
to get it up to 19. So that would be 34. I'm just showing my work.
I go from the year I graduated high school, 1986, so 1985. There we go.
I was always told to show your work at school. Like,
Yeah.
don't just have the answer. Show how you got to it.
Hey kids, we just did old math for you. It's very efficient. I didn't use my hands or my toes, but that's how old school math. You
Okay,
get to the answer. It don't matter how.
So what I'm saying is, he's 34, which is young for a director. He's made 3 films, and he's reminding me of Paul Thomas Anderson when he was young and he was just cranking out. You were like, wow, that's a great film. Oh my God, that's an even better film. Like that, Mm-hmm. So, I'm blown away. He's fast becoming one of my favorite directors. What about you?
No, I think it's beautiful, for one, like beautifully shot. And I think he got the best out of people, which,
I saw complaints about it being handheld. The whole movie's handheld, right?
And it has its moments of that could be a little bit irritating, but I got over it. I figured out that there was a purpose for it sometimes, and I was okay with it.
Yeah, it made it feel a bit rough sometimes, but it seemed right to me. Like a bit imperfect, if you get what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And yeah, I get annoyed by shaky cam, like Cloverfield, where it's actually ridiculously shaky and makes you feel ill.
Yeah.
This isn't that. It's just more like you can tell somebody is holding the camera and they've not got it docked on some kind of steady cam thing. It's more held. And during the space parts, it's not like that. But the space parts are very, very shaky because they're going into space. And it isn't a very still thing. They're being shaken
Hello,
around.
idiots. They're going into space.
No,
Is
but
that what you're saying?
I'm absolutely impressed by this director. Now I just want to see the next thing. If it, it's a home run for me. Three in a row of awesome. So extras on this Blu-ray, and there are a bunch. There are deleted scenes, and then there's a bunch of featurettes, pretty much covering everything. And there's a feature commentary with Mr. Chazelle, which I'm absolutely going to listen to this week. This is the first movie that Damien Chazelle didn't write. This is a movie he took on.
First movie of all time? Wow.
Of his movies. because he wrote and directed his other two. But this one's, taking on somebody else's work, also did a great job with it. So there are a bunch of extras on there. If you're into this movie, I'm definitely going to listen to that commentary. So conclusion, like I said earlier, it's literally a 10 out of 10 for me. I love it. I'll watch it again. Can I watch it again now?
Yes. You're a grown man. You can pretty much do what you want.
And that's my take on First Man. And yours is?
I absolutely agree. I think it's fun in a what you wouldn't consider conventionally fun kind of way. Just because it's beautiful to look at, for me, that's a big deal. And I learned some things, not necessarily, about really how things work when you're becoming an astronaut, but like getting up and close with the equipment and that whole feeling of we're all under the impression it's all super high tech, slick, 2001 Space Odyssey kind of looking stuff. It's not.
Not at all.
It's a bucket. And I bet even now, people who are in the space world and the ISS, floating above the Earth, would also say, it's not quite as high tech as you think it is.
Yeah, and I also learned, spoiler, that I had no idea that those three, and they're three main characters in the movie, really. They were doing a test thing. They just put them in the capsule and sealed it up to see if the oxygen and everything was working. And it set on fire and killed all three of them. I had no idea that happened.
I didn't either, and I feel like I should have known that.
And I feel like I should have known it. And I was like, is that for dramatic effect? Surely not, they wouldn't do that. And I looked it up, and it's obviously what really happened. But it was literally like they were in an oven, the oven caught a light, and they all burnt it. They didn't even pull them out of there for some time. So I had no idea. So that scene, for me, I was like, oh, this is a cool test. And then I was like, oh, really? I don't remember this happening.
Yeah, this is horrible. This is actually very horrible.
Yeah. So, there is some danger in this movie. And even if I thought I knew everything about it, but obviously I didn't. So, thank you to Universal for providing us with a copy for review. Next week, we're going to be looking at the horror movie Suspiria, which is a remake of Dario Argento's 70s classic, which you never saw, right?
Correct. It
is a classic amongst horror people.
Okay, I'm in.
Yeah, and this is the remake, which we're going to see.
People maybe don't know. I love horror.
Yeah. You probably, after seeing this one, you probably want to see the original too. So, because it is pretty unique. So, movie recommendations. This isn't a movie, but whenever I see a space thing, and I think about that spacesuit that I used to wear as a kid, I always think of the $6 Million Man, because the opening sequence, the credit title sequence, the first thing you see is him in his spacesuit doing his astronaut thing before he becomes the $6 Million Man. So I'm going to recommend the $6 Million Man. They were going to make a movie of it with Marky Mark as the $6 Million Man, but he dropped out recently. So there's still going to be a movie, but I don't know who it's going to be. Is he too
good to be the $6 Million Man? Is he the $6 billion man?
He's the $7 million man. So there is still going to be a $6 Million Man, just not with Marky Mark. And my other space movie, which I really, really love, and this movie did give me some vibes of, especially with classical music playing in space, which seems to be a theme of space movies. And it's 2001: A Space Odyssey, Stanley Kubrick's masterpiece, I would say, definitely. If you've not seen it, what have you...
That would be your opinion.
Have you even seen any films?
Any space films? Like, you're not a space person if you haven't seen that one.
No.
And I will recommend... I'm not yawning because I'm bored.
I'll recommend going to sleep early.
It's been a couple days. Yeah, forget that. I started out the week staying at work for 36 hours in a row because...
You did?
Weather. People couldn't come in, so I just stayed there.
So you recommend staying at work?
You know what? If it's needed and if it benefits your place of work, which for me, it's our data center. It's my little
this week we had major snow.
Yeah, big snow.
You had that thing where you had to do the thing.
It was an eventful week.
You didn't sleep very well.
No.
You probably need more sleep.
I'd guess that. My recommendations are Cosmos, the TV show from 1980 with Carl Sagan.
Oh, yeah.
Because if I had watched that when I was a kid, 80, I wasn't a kid. I was 10. Well, 12. But if I'd seen it as littler even, oh man, as much as I've always just been fascinated with space and the universe anyway, I loved it as an adult. I would have loved it as a kid. There's a newer version with Neil deGrasse Tyson, but I actually think the earlier one was better. And then that's exploring space, the physical thing that what seems to be the hardest for mankind to explore. And then I'm going to recommend Inception, because that goes deep inside your mind.
There's also
another place where it's difficult, I think, for mankind to dig.
Yeah, and on the other side of Inception by Christopher Nolan, there's also Interstellar, which deals with mind and space.
True. I don't understand why people thought Interstellar was so great, but
it was pretty great.
It was fine. I don't get the hoopla about it, but it was fine.
If you like space.
No, I like space. That doesn't mean I like that movie.
All right, so Sitok does not like Interstellar.
I didn't say I don't like it. I said I don't understand the hoopla about it.
The hoopla was, it was Christopher Nolan. It looked amazing and
looked pretty good.
It did kind of fall apart at the end. I have to give it that. The bookshelves and all that stuff.
Yeah, and I love weird shit. So don't think I don't like weird things that make you go, "What the hell is that all about?" I love all that kind of stuff.
Like a dimensional loop.
Yeah, and that's fine. I dig it. I'm a Star Trek fan. I can handle any kind of weird things you want to think of with time, space, continuum, and all that shit. But when it was over, I was like, that's entertaining. It was kind of fun, kind of cool. Why is everybody freaking out? I do not understand.
Wow.
It's the same as with whatever with Sandra Bullock also.
I'm going to knock you off the movie list. Sandra Bullock, you mean Gravity?
Yeah, it was fine too, but
I didn't like the ending of Gravity, but I did like the spectacle of space part.
It was fine,
yeah.
But I don't understand the like, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god part. I just don't got it.
All right, so a Scully stuff. I've been playing a game on the PS4 called The Grand Tour game. This week, Amazon released
Hey, Scully, The Grand Tour is not a game. It's a TV show. It's not even a TV show. It's an Amazon show.
Yeah, every time I say Amazon, my tablet wakes up. Hold on. I have to turn that off.
We've got things listening to us. People would think we're like the biggest victims of spying of all time, but whatever.
I turned it off. Okay, so Amazon have a show called The Grand Tour. What The Grand Tour is basically BBC had a show, still have a show, called Top Gear. But the three presenters of Top Gear left. They moved to Amazon, and they made their own show called The Grand Tour, which is really just Top Gear with a different name, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's what it is. So the third season started this week. Episode 1 came out on Friday. And with that, this season, there is a video game. And I'm not talking like a mobile game. It's like a full console game. It's on the PS4 and the Xbox. It costs $15, so it's not a ridiculous price. And what you get is, for every episode of this season, which is 13 episodes, you get a game that goes with the episode. So after the show is ended, you can go to the PlayStation and turn it on. I would recommend not watching the show at all, to be honest. Don't watch the show. Just play the game, because the game contains the whole show. So what you're doing is you're watching the whole hour of the show, and whenever it comes to a point in the show where Hammond or Clarkson or May test drive a car or race cars against each other, you actually race the cars. So they've built a racing game into the show. I've never seen anything like that. I'm a massive fan of those three, as you know. Mm-hmm. I've watched pretty much everything that they've done. And this is a really cool way of...
Even when he punched that guy, you're a big fan of that?
I'm a fan of whatever they do, really. Punching a guy, getting pissed off because he didn't...
There's controversy about Jeremy Clarkson because he punched a guy. Jeremy Clarkson, is that his name?
Because the guy didn't get him the right sandwich.
Yeah, I mean, that's debatable, I think, of the reason, but yeah. They get fired from BBC, which is why the Grand Tour show Endgame exists on Amazon.
Right. And I think the Grand Tour is actually better than what they did on the BBC.
It's pretty entertaining.
Yeah, it is. It's really funny, and even they say we're not really a car show. We're more of a comedy show, but we happen to have cars in our show. Mm. Even they say that. That don't come to their show thinking it's a serious review of a car.
And on BBC, the whole thing is education, and that they had to be forced to pretend they were educating people all the time.
This is more fun than that. And Amazon have a huge...
It's more fun than education.
Yeah, Amazon have this really huge budget for this show, so they do lots of crazy stuff. So how the game works, you... Like, in this first episode of this season, it was about Detroit and, like, Detroit Motor City, which is what it's named. So they went to Detroit and they drove muscle cars around the city, and that was their big adventure for this show. And Hammond builds this big racetrack in this disused warehouse. And once you get to that part in the show, and you do see the whole show, it's not like an abbreviated version of the show, you're watching the whole thing. When you get to the abandoned race and they do the race, each one of them does a lap around it in the show. You do the lap around it in the exact car that they do it in. And the cut between the show and the game is really, like, you can't really tell it's happening. And the cars look so good. They look just like they do. And then they cut back to the show from the game. And they do it, like, seamlessly. So you're like, oh, is that me? And I'm driving, and then all of a sudden Jeremy Clarkson's looking at me from the passenger seat. It's really interesting how they did it. It's a bit of hit and miss. Some of them are really simple, like the bit that you only saw a little bit in the end part. And that was like a drag race where you had to just rev the accelerator and get it in the green part, and then you'd win the race. That's more kind of like a drag race game. But I would recommend you don't watch the show and play the game first, and then if you want to go back and watch the show again, just watch the show, but you actually get to experience each episode as it comes out. That's actually cheaper than subscribing to Amazon Prime to watch the show. Funnily enough, it's $15 for this whole thing.
Yeah, if that's the only thing you want on Amazon.
Right. Exactly. If you only want to watch the Grand Tour, you have to subscribe to Amazon Prime, which is $120. This is a way of watching the Grand Tour every week, and also having a fun little video game thrown into it too. So I've never seen anything like it. I think it's a perfect way of doing it. I was hoping it wasn't just like tiny little clips of the Grand Tour and then you just do a race. I think this feels more like you're playing the show, which is what the idea was. So yeah, I really dig it. It's the handling and the physics and all that. Don't expect Forza. It's more arcadey, very arcadey, like Need for Speed. If you've played Need for Speed, it feels like that. In fact, the team that are responsible for the actual game are actually some of the guys from Need for Speed. So don't expect everything handles perfectly and it feels like, each car. It's more like an arcade game. You press the accelerator and you steer around the corners. It's not like trying to emulate everything. But sometimes that's fun too, So, the Grand Tour game, I'm completely impressed. It's the first game from Amazon Games. So I think Amazon are going to get into the game business. And the other game, which I haven't played yet, but I have got now, is Fallout 76, the new Fallout game. I'll talk about it next week when I've played it. So what's for dinner, Sid Dog?
Tonight, if you can smell it? Can everybody smell it? I made homemade bread again. I'm on a kick. I had 3 packets of yeast. I'm now out of yeast.
Yeast?
Yeast, as my grandma used to say. Get the yeast out of the cupboard for me. She'd also say shrimp. We're going to have
shrimp,
fried shrimp with no H. So I don't know what was going on. She dropped a Y and dropped an H, whatever.
East and shrimp.
East and shrimp, yes. But I've been making homemade bread. What would be your verdict on my homemade bread?
I really like this homemade bread.
Thank you.
Especially as a cheese toasty.
Yeah, you haven't had that yet. You're just saying that because that's what you want for supper.
I have had it. You did it for me last time.
I didn't make it with homemade bread.
Oh, no.
No.
Oh, maybe that was why it was really good.
So what you're having is grilled cheese, which isn't cheese.
Fake cheese.
We're vegetarian, and also you shouldn't eat much hardcore dairy, so we have... It's not fake. It's fake cheese.
It is fake cheese.
Plant-based.
Cheese product stuff.
Plant-based cheese.
Plant cheese.
It's pretty good, but I just want toast and soup, so you're going to have grilled cheese and soup and homemade toast with toasted cheese. And it's really good. If you've never baked bread, That's my advice today, in fact.
The new oven that we got last year.
Oh, yeah.
It also has a proving mode.
Yeah, and I'd only just tried it today, and it was perfect.
You put put your dough in there to prove, and it just heats it up ever so slightly, right?
Proof with an F. We have to be distinctive.
Prove, sorry.
No, proof.
Proof.
Proof it. Yes. We looked it up, Mr. Redding and I.
Why does everybody say prove? It's like your grandmother, isn't it?
Yeah. It's actually proofing. So, I mean, you can look it up. There's some controversy. Some people debate it. But I think it's really good.
Well, it turns the oven on very, very slightly.
Very slightly. Not even warm enough to warm food. In fact, it says in the instructions, do not use this setting to keep your food warm because it will not. It's just like you open it up and it feels just a tiniest bit warmer than the house.
And it did it perfectly.
Perfect. I mean, don't discount my abilities. Because mixing it right, getting the liquid the right temperature to get your yeast activated, the right amount of stuff, and I've been using, just if anyone's interested, I looked up why my grandma's recipes said to use scalded milk. Looked it up, and there's something to do with the proteins, and they get stretched, and they do better with like bringing the gluten and the yeast and blah, blah, blah. You'd have to look it up. But so I was like, well, I don't want to use dairy. So I had coconut milk, just a carton of whatever the brand is, coconut milk. And decided to use that instead. And instead of sugar, like white sugar, you put like 2 tablespoons of sugar in there for the yeast to grow from. I used molasses, which is also sugar. And it's absolutely, and I use my KitchenAid because my Aunt Mary's recipe, and this is from 60 years ago, 70 years ago. She must have had an old KitchenAid or a new one at the time because she says, let your machine mix it for 15 minutes, do the kneading for you, basically.
Right.
So that's what I've been doing. And it's just turning out fantastic.
So you have to have some tools to do that, but you can do it by hand.
No, you don't. I mean, you don't actually. I could just knead. What the thing is, I let it knead it for 15 minutes. So if I were to do it, I would just stand there and knead it for 15 minutes. I think you would get a similar result, but it's just less messy, and you don't have to get the whole counter involved. And I can sit there and let it do it, and I can watch it, add the amount of flour that needs to go in there to get it to the right consistency, and so no, you don't need the machine. You don't need a proofing thing in your oven because if I warm up the bathroom a little bit, our bathroom is easy to warm up. You just shut the door and it gets really warm really quick, or run a bunch of hot water in the tub and it'll warm up the bathroom. Set your dough in there covered up for an hour. It'll raise, or put it on top of the fridge like my mom always used to do, just because it's warmer. But our house has been really cold lately. And one of the key things about baking bread is you don't want to have to try to raise your dough in a cold house.
You know why our house has been cold lately? Because it's snowing outside.
It's not snowing currently, but it has been down to like 8 degrees earlier today, and now it's about 30. We have a lot of variety here in Middle America.
Is it 30?
I think so.
I disagree with that.
Oh, it's 18.
18 right now. All right. So that is
my advice is bake some bread. Just look it up, figure it out. Even if it fails miserably, I've failed for years until now. And somehow I just now have the patience and figured out, even doing it during the movie today. You see, I did the dough, let it rise. We were watching the movie. I set my timer. We did a pee break so I could go punch it down, put it in the pans, raise it up again, took a pee break during the movie, come back upstairs, get the oven turned on, and I just crossed my fingers, turned the oven on, and set it for 30 minutes without even... Usually, what am I doing when I'm baking bread? When you come in the kitchen?
Watching Bob's Burgers.
No, what am I doing when the bread is baking? You come in the kitchen.
You're looking in the oven like it's a television.
Yeah, I'm down on the floor. I'm sitting on the floor watching the bread do whatever it's doing.
Have you ever watched the Great British Bake Off? Whenever they're cooking something, they all just look in the oven.
It's real. I can't believe it sometimes that it's just like magic in front of your eyeballs. I would love to put a camera in there. That would be great. Oh, that's my next oven. We'll have a camera inside. But I just let it go. I let it bake for 30 minutes without ever looking at it or questioning it. My 30 minutes went off. I took it out. It was really browned and nice, and it is perfect.
You could do a time lapse of your bread rising and baking.
The light inside is so bright that when I've tried with my phone or with my camera, it's the light in there is just overwhelming. So.
All right. So you can catch us on ascully.com and sidtalk.com. You can catch us on Twitter, Facebook. This podcast is available on the Google Play Store, the iTunes Music Store. You can go to ascully.com, click on the word podcast. You can listen straight from the page. You can use an Amazon device. You can say the trigger word and then say listen to After the Show movie podcast on TuneIn. It will play the latest episode. You can also find us on YouTube. You can email feedback to me at ascully@ascully.com. Don't email SidTalk. She really hates you all.
I don't.
She wants to throw bread dough at you.
No, I don't want to waste my bread dough. I don't hate anyone. In fact, I'm pretty not hate-filled at all. I do not understand some people.
She don't understand any of it.
And I will think that you're stupid or that you're lame or that you're just wallowing in ignorance or that you are intentionally trying to be a twat. That doesn't mean I hate you. It means I may not like your behavior or how you think about a thing, but everyone has potential.
And stay classy, Mr. Damien Chazelle and Mr. Ryan Gosling. A great partnership. Make another film together, please. Just for me.
And I'm going to say, think for yourselves or someone will do it for you.